The ship is an LPD-17 San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock. 684 feet long, roughly 360 Navy crew, plus up to 700 Marines embarked when the well deck is loaded. The vessel is built to carry, launch, and recover landing craft and tilt-rotor aircraft. But the story this video tells happens far below the flight deck, in the enlisted berthing compartments 2 and 3 decks down from the main passageway. In one of those compartments, a second-class petty officer, an E5, a mid-grade enlisted sailor with 2 hazard stripes on his sleeve, is preparing for a 90-day underway period. He shares the berthing space with up to 40 other sailors. The racks are stacked 3 high. His is the middle rack, which is widely considered the best of the 3. The bottom rack catches every dropped boot. The top rack bakes against the overhead ventilation. The middle rack is the quiet seat in the theater. His rack measures 24 inches wide, 76 inches long, and roughly 20 inches of headroom above the mattress. Underneath the mattress, hinged on a gas strut, sits the coffin locker, a steel-lined storage well about 6 inches deep, the length and width of the bunk. There is one small upright wall locker assigned to him in the passageway outside, roughly the dimensions of a high school gym locker. That is the complete storage allowance for 90 days of life. Think about what that means for a second.
3 months of clothing, hygiene gear, professional materials, and any sliver of personal identity has to fold into a space smaller than the trunk of a compact sedan. The packing list begins with the sea bag. The official Navy sea bag for an enlisted male sailor is not a suggestion. It is a published, line-itemed inventory in the uniform regulations, and it is checked at quarters before the brow is pulled. The list includes Navy working uniform type 3 blouses and trousers, typically 4 sets. 2 sets of dress blues for any port call requiring liberty in uniform. 1 set of dress whites, depending on the season and the deployment region. Physical training gear, at least 3 PT shirts, 3 pairs of PT shorts, and 1 sweatsuit. 6 pairs of boot socks, 6 pairs of underwear. 6 undershirts in coyote brown for wear under the NWU blouse. Then come the boots. 2 pairs of safety boots, because boots get soaked in the well deck, soaked on the flight deck, soaked walking across a rain-slicked weather deck during a sea and anchor detail. A sailor with 1 pair of boots is a sailor with wet feet for 3 days. 1 pair of dress shoes, 1 pair of running shoes for the small ship gym tucked aft. 1 pair of shower shoes, which are not optional. The head is shared, and athlete's foot is a documented occupational hazard. The petty officer lays it all out on the mess decks the night before muster.
The uniform items alone, folded, rolled, compressed in the way every recruit learns at boot camp, fill more than half of the coffin locker before a single personal item enters the equation. That is the detail that surprises civilians the most. Before he packs a toothbrush, before he packs a photograph, before he packs a paperback novel, the Navy has already claimed his storage. The hygiene kit goes in a hard-shell case roughly the size of a lunchbox. Toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, razor, blades, shaving cream, nail clippers, body wash, shampoo, a small bottle of foot powder, Q-tips, a second razor as a backup, because the ship's store runs out of common items by week 4 of any underway period and never restocks predictably. A small mirror, because there are only so many sinks in the head, and standing in line at 0530 to shave is a losing strategy when general quarters can be called at any moment. Now, the obvious question. Why not just buy what he needs in port? The answer is that port calls on an amphibious deployment are not guaranteed. They're typically scheduled every 3 to 4 weeks for 3 to 5 days, but they are subject to operational change without notice. A sailor who plans to restock razor blades in Rota and ends up bypassing rota for a contingency tasking is a sailor shaving with a dull blade for another month. The sea bag is packed for the worst case, not the schedule.
There is also the matter of the ship's store itself, which deserves its own paragraph, because civilians consistently misunderstand it. The ship's store on an LPD is not a convenience store. It is a small steel room, roughly the size of a walk-in closet, stocked by a single logistics specialist who orders based on projected demand and limited shelf space. It carries candy bars, soda, a narrow selection of toiletries, uniform components like socks and undershirts, and a rotating selection of Navy-branded apparel. It does not carry the brand of deodorant the sailor prefers. It does not carry replacement earbuds when his break. It does not carry the right size boot insole. It opens for 2 hours in the afternoon and 1 hour in the evening, and the line stretches into the passageway. The sailor who waited until deployment to buy what he needed is the sailor learning to do without. Professional gear takes the next layer. A small notebook, called a wheel book, kept in the breast pocket of the NWU blouse. A working flashlight with red lens filter, because passageways are rigged for darkened ship at night, and white light kills night vision. A multi-tool, almost always a Leatherman or a Gerber, clipped to the belt. A pair of leather work gloves. A reflective belt, mandatory for any movement on the weather decks after dark. Hearing protection, foam plugs and over-ear muffs for any time spent near the engineering spaces or the flight deck.
A float coat is issued from the ship, not packed, but the personal kit includes a small pouch of spare ID cards, military and civilian, sealed in a waterproof bag. Then the rate-specific gear. If the sailor is an operations specialist, he carries his qualification books and a study binder for the next advancement exam. If he is a boatswain's mate, he carries his marlin spike and his personal pair of rigging gloves. If he is a hospital corpsman attached to the embarked Marine detachment, he carries an additional aid bag with his own preferences in tape, shears, and tourniquets. Every rate has its own small toolkit of personal items that the Navy does not issue, but every experienced sailor brings. The advancement exam materials deserve a moment of attention because they are the single largest professional bulk item in most sea bags. The Navy-wide advancement exam happens twice a year, and a second class, trying to make first class, is studying from a stack of bibliographies that runs to several hundred pages of dense technical reference. He carries the bibliography itself, printed and 3-hole punched. He carries flashcards he made on Liberty the month before. He carries a battered copy of the Blue Jackets Manual, the foundational reference text every enlisted sailor owns. He carries his rate training manual, dog-eared and highlighted. All of this lives in a single nylon binder, and it occupies roughly the same cubic volume as 4 folded uniform blouses.
The trade is conscious. He sacrifices a change of clothes to make rank. Most sailors at his level make the same trade. That is the official packing list. Now comes the unofficial one. The contraband layer is what gets confiscated at muster, and every sailor knows the rules and tests them anyway. Alcohol is the most common item pulled out of sea bags during the pre-underway sweep. Not in volume, usually a single airline-sized bottle tucked into a boot or rolled into a pair of socks. It almost never makes it past the master-at-arms. The dogs are good. The petty officers running the inspection have seen every hiding place since they were boots themselves. Knives over the regulation blade length get pulled. Personal firearms, of course, are a federal-level violation and effectively never appear. Vape pens and e-cigarettes occupy a grey zone, permitted on some ships, banned on others, with the policy varying by the commanding officer's standing orders. Energy drinks in bulk are technically allowed, but discouraged, because a sailor mainlining 4 cans of Rip It on a midwatch is a sailor who crashes hard at 0800 and misses muster. Pornography in physical form, magazines, printed images, is banned by Navy policy and has been since 1996 under a Department of Defense directive. Digital content on personal devices occupies a more ambiguous space, and the ship's information systems policy governs what can be accessed on the unclassified network.
The petty officer knows the rules. Most sailors comply. Some test the edges. The master-at-arms catches what he catches. That is the negative space of the packing list. What is allowed, what is banned, and what falls in between. The interesting question, the one that defines the actual texture of life at sea, is what each sailor chooses to spend his precious cubic inches on after the regulations have taken their share. For this second-class petty officer, the answer is small and specific. A paperback book, usually a thriller or a piece of military history, traded around the berthing compartment until the spine falls apart. A pair of civilian sweatpants and a hoodie for off-duty hours in the racks, technically allowed in berthing only, never in passageways. A pair of cheap wireless earbuds because the rack curtain is thin and 40 sailors snore. A laptop used for training videos, personal email during the rationed Wi-Fi windows, and the occasional downloaded movie. A small electric fan that clips to the rack frame, not strictly issued, but tolerated by most chiefs because the berthing compartment runs hot when the ship is operating in low latitudes. And one photograph. Always one photograph. In a small frame, usually plastic, occasionally metal, never glass, because glass shatters in a heavy sea state, and the chief will write the sailor up for an unsafe rack.
The frame is wedged into the corner of the small shelf above the pillow, angled so that when the sailor lies on his back and pulls the curtain shut, the photograph is the last thing he sees before he closes his eyes. That photograph survives every inspection. Inspectors see it. They do not touch it. There is an unwritten rule on every ship the author of this script could find documented in published memoirs and oral histories. The photo frame is sacred. A chief who tears down a sailor's photograph during a zone inspection is a chief who has lost the deck plate. It is not in the regulations. It is in the culture. He was 26 years old, married 3 years, one daughter born during his last deployment, whose first steps he watched on a video clip sent through the rationed Wi-Fi at 30 minutes per sailor per day. The photograph is of her, taken the morning he left for the Brow. She's holding a stuffed elephant. The frame is plastic. It cost $4 at a Navy exchange in Virginia Beach. The civilian assumption about Navy deployments is that sailors live in some compressed approximation of a college dorm, small, but with the basic shape of a private room. That assumption is wrong by an order of magnitude. The accurate comparison is closer to a capsule hotel in Tokyo, except the capsule shares its compartment with 39 other capsules. The lights are on a controlled cycle the sailor does not set, and the ventilation runs on a schedule dictated by the engineering plant. The other civilian assumption is that the Navy issues everything a sailor needs. That is half true. The Navy issues uniforms, boots, basic safety gear, and the rack itself. The Navy does not issue the wireless earbuds that make berthing tolerable, the paperback that makes a mid-watch break survivable, the photograph that makes the rack feel like a home. Those come out of the sailor's pocket and the sailor's cubic inches. The system is built for function, not comfort. That is not a complaint. That is the design philosophy of a warship, and any sailor who signed the contract understood the trade. But the small, personal layer, the $4 frame, the clipped fan, the dog-eared paperback, is what turns a steel berthing compartment into a place where 40 Americans can live for 3 months without losing themselves. The packing itself takes about 4 hours, done methodically the night before underway. The sea bag goes in last on top of the coffin locker, so it can be pulled and stowed in the wall locker once the sailor is settled. The hygiene kit lives in the corner of the coffin locker, accessible without unloading the whole space. The uniforms are rolled, not folded, because rolled uniforms compress tighter and resist wrinkling in a way folded ones do not. Boot camp teaches this. Fleet sailors refine it. There is a specific technique that most sailors learn from a senior petty officer in their first deployment, and it never appears in any official manual. The trousers are laid flat. The legs are folded in thirds, lengthwise. Then the whole garment is rolled tightly from the waistband down, and the rolled cylinder is secured with the trouser's own belt or with a length of paracord. The blouse follows the same logic. Sleeves folded across the chest, then rolled from the collar to the hem. The result is a uniform that occupies roughly 40% of the volume of a folded one, and emerges from the coffin locker with only the faintest crease across the shoulder line. Multiply that compression across 4 sets of NWUs, 2 sets of dress blues, and a set of whites, and the savings are not marginal. They are the difference between fitting a paperback in the locker or leaving it on the pier. The watch bill is posted before the brow is pulled. The petty officer learns he is in a 3-section watch rotation, 6 hours on, 12 hours off, which means his sleep is broken into roughly 6-hour blocks for the duration of the underway. The middle rack now matters more than ever. It is the quietest. The bottom rack catches passing foot traffic. The top rack catches the overhead lights. The middle is where actual sleep happens. Meals are taken on the mess decks, 3 decks up from berthing. The ship serves 4 meals a day during underway operations: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and mid-rats, the midnight rations meal for the watchstanders coming off and going on. The mess decks seat roughly 100 sailors at a time and serve continuously for about 90 minutes per meal. The petty officer eats fast. Most sailors do. There is always someone waiting for the seat. Fresh water on an LPD is not unlimited, but is generally adequate, unlike on smaller surface combatants, where water hours are sometimes enforced. The petty officer can shower daily, though Navy shower discipline, wet down, water off, soap up, water on, rinse, water off, is taught from the first day and observed by most sailors out of habit. A long shower in port is one of the small luxuries every deployed sailor remembers. The first week underway is the hardest. The body adjusts to the watch rotation, the constant motion of the ship, the unfamiliar sounds. The petty officer sleeps poorly, eats too much at mid-rats, and forgets where he stored his second pair of boots. By week 3, the rhythm sets in. By week 6, the rack feels like home. By week 10, the photograph on the shelf is the only thing that reminds him there is a world outside the steel. There is a moment most sailors describe in interviews and memoirs, somewhere around the 60-day mark of a long underway, when the ship stops feeling like a place they are visiting and starts feeling like a place they live. The rack becomes the bed. The mess decks become the kitchen. The 40 bunkmates become the neighbors. The photograph above the pillow becomes the front porch. It is not romantic. It is functional. It is how the human mind adjusts to 90 days inside a steel hull. Around that same 60-day mark, the berthing compartment develops its own microeconomy. Snacks bought in bulk at the Navy Exchange before deployment become trade currency. A bag of beef jerky is worth a favor on the watch bill. A sealed package of name-brand coffee is worth more than the ship's store version, which, by week 8, has reduced sailors to drinking whatever instant blend the supply chief could source. Paperbacks circulate on a strict honor system. The sailor in Rack 12 has the Vince Flynn novel. The sailor in Rack 21 has the Bernard Cornwell. And both books will pass through every middle rack in the compartment before the deployment ends. Movies move on thumb drives, passed between laptops in a silent network that the information systems officer is officially unaware of and unofficially tolerates. None of this is in any manual. All of it is how the compartment survives. There are also the rituals that emerge without anyone organizing them.
The Sunday morning when a particular petty officer brews coffee on his rack-mounted single-cup machine and quietly hands a cup to the sailor across the aisle who just stood a brutal mid-watch. The birthday that gets marked by a stack of stale ship's store cupcakes balanced on the corner of a coffin locker, with the lights briefly dimmed and a low chorus of voices that have to stay quiet because the night shift is sleeping. The first burial-at-sea letter that gets read aloud at the table when a sailor's grandfather dies stateside and the Red Cross message comes through during the morning brief. The compartment closes around its own. It is one of the few things about Navy life that civilians cannot easily picture because it does not photograph well and does not show up in the recruiting commercials. Now, you might wonder why the Navy does not simply allocate more storage per sailor. The answer is hull volume. Every cubic foot of berthing storage is a cubic foot not available for fuel, fresh water, ammunition, embarked marine berthing, vehicle storage in the well deck, or aircraft maintenance space above. The LPD-17 is designed around mission load, not crew comfort. The 24-inch rack is not a cost-cutting decision. It is a naval architecture decision that traces back to the ship's keel. The other obvious question is why sailors do not simply mail items home or forward to the next port. Some do. The ship has a small post office that runs when operationally feasible.
But mail is unreliable on a deploying amphibious ship. Packages can take weeks to arrive, and any item mailed forward is an item the sailor does not have in the meantime. The sea bag is the safer system. Pack heavy, pack right, pack once. The packing list in the end is a portrait of a person rendered in cubic inches. 4 sets of NWU, 2 sets of dress blues, 6 pairs of socks, 6 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of boots, 1 hygiene kit, 1 multi-tool, 1 flashlight, 1 paperback, 1 pair of earbuds, 1 small fan, 1 photograph in a plastic frame. That is the inventory. That is 90 days of a life. When the brow is pulled and the lines are singled up and the LPD eases away from the pier, the petty officer is already in his rack, curtain drawn, the photograph wedged into its corner above the pillow. He has 6 hours until his first watch. The ship is barely past the harbor mouth. The deployment has not yet begun in any operational sense. But for him, it began the moment he closed the curtain on his 24-inch kingdom and looked at the $4 frame. The plastic, the stuffed elephant, the small face of a child who will be 3 months older the next time he sees her in person. That is what he packed. That is what survived every inspection. That is what no regulation could compress, because it occupies no measurable cubic inches at all. The rack is 24 inches wide. The Navy fills more than half of it before the sailor packs a single personal item. What he chooses for the rest, the $4, the plastic, the elephant, is the part of him that goes to sea.